Good morning, everyone. So I am out in my garden and I'm going to be taking to the task of pruning my shrub roses. This is something that I do around late March every year in my Zone 6B garden. Typically you want to do it in late winter, early spring for your zone. And I do it just when I start to see my roses break dormancy a little bit and their buds starting to swell on their canes. So I'm going to be sharing how to prune your shrub roses for their maximum vigor and vitality and for maximum bloom production and health for the season ahead. Okay, so to get started, I always make sure that I have my Felco No. 2 pruners, some isopropyl alcohol to disinfect between rose bushes and sometimes even between cuts if I'm removing a dead or diseased cane, and a clean white cloth. There are two different ways you're going to prune shrub roses, and that depends on the age of the rose. If it has pruned 2 or more seasons, you are going to remove half of the height of the rose. If it has flowered less than 2 seasons, you are going to prune the rose down to about 12 to 14 inches off the ground. So there's 2 ways you can do that. You can cut a bamboo cane to the height that you need to prune your rose to keep it as a guide, which is a great way to do it, or you can just eyeball it. I have over 100 roses in my garden now, so this is a big spring job for me. So I won't be taking you along with me as I do all of the roses, but just keep in mind that I do not worry about angled cuts. I can blunt cut the roses. There used to be this idea of thought that if you cut the roses at an angle, the canes at an angle, rain would fall off and not go into the canes and possibly rot the cane. That's not really something that we really need to worry about. The other thing is if you need to prune down to a bud, I don't worry about that either. I worry more about the height and keeping the airflow good inside the rose, keeping it that nice vase goblet shape. Those are the things that we really want to pay attention for, look for, as well as removing dead and flimsy canes that we don't need, that aren't going to be serving a purpose anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean my pruners again. It is a little bit like a landmine in here because all of my tulips and daffodils and peonies are sprouting up out of the ground and I don't want to step on them and ruin them. So I'm going to proceed with caution and step lightly. So this rose has been in my garden. This is a David Austin. This is Princess Alexandra of Kent. And this is flowered in my garden. This is one of the first I planted. So this will be its 4th year, 3rd or 4th year flowering in my garden. So it is well established now, and it is already starting to break dormancy. There are buds coming up all on the canes. So I don't want to be scared about removing half the height. So you want to go off the average height. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down to about 2 feet or so off the ground. This is about a 4-foot tall rose. Okay, so now that I have brought down the height, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove any crossing or damaged and diseased canes. You don't want to have a big cluster of canes in the center of the rose because it's going to restrict airflow. We also know that anything that's really slimmer than a pencil isn't going to be strong enough to hold and produce a nice cluster of roses this season. So we want to promote all the strong canes. So I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning that up, but keeping in mind we want to have the rose shaped to be something like an open vase and nothing that is crisscrossing. The other thing I want to make sure that you do is to remove any of the dead leaves from last year. We don't want to leave any of the old leaves or foliage on from last season. So now that I've gone ahead and pruned away all of the dead and broken stems, tried to remove any of the growth that's growing back in towards the center of the rose, trying to keep it nice and open in the central part, removed all the dead foliage. I'm going to be cleaning up the base of the rose with a little hand fork of any of the leaves that fell down from last year that might be harboring insects or diseases. I will be fertilizing this rose, watering it in well, and it's set to go. Here are really good examples of a newly planted rose. These are David Austin Harlow-Carr roses that I planted from bare root last year. So these have only been in the ground in my garden for 1 whole year. I am going to be pruning these all to about 14 inches or so from the ground, so it won't be removing too much growth off of these roses. I am going to be removing any dead or crossing stems, anything that is really spindly, but this is a very young rose, and I'm going to be a little bit more gentle with the pruning so that it has time to establish this season. I'm also going to be cleaning up around the base, and we'll be getting it ready to be fertilized. Right, now that's that job done. These are 3 Harlow-Carr roses that have now been cleaned up, had their spring pruning, and are ready to be fertilized. If anything, this job has made me more excited to really tuck into my beds, get them really nice and clean, and remove all the debris from last year, and just get them all prepped and ready to take off for the year. Okay, so I'm back inside, and I'm going to give you a little update on how my seedlings are doing that we started together last week, and I'm going to show you how I thin them out before I close out the video for today. Okay, so as you can see, I've got lots of thinning to do on our tomatoes and kale and broccoli, and I have the coreopsis as well, which I'm going to let grow up a little bit before I thin those out. And then these are the foxgloves, which are looking good. I have most of the cells up. I'll probably be doing some transplanting when these get a little bit bigger. I don't want to thin those out quite at this stage. And this is the coreopsis and the rudbeckia. I've got a little bit of fuzz and a couple of the cells that I'm going to clean out. But overall, these guys are looking good. So I've got my tray of tomatoes and kale and broccoli, and I'm going to take my favorite snips. These are by a company called ARS, and I will link them for you below if you are in need of some good snips. I'm going to go ahead, just like with my rose pruning, I'm going to make sure these are disinfected. This is the time in gardening to be ruthless, and actually quite often in gardening you need to be ruthless. However, if you don't thin them out, you're going to end up with a bunch of plants that are competing for light, nutrients, water, and you're not going to do anything for yourself. So be ruthless, thin them out, and you will be much better off with one healthy, solid plant than a bunch of sickly plants that are competing with each other. So you're basically going to take your snips and you're going to cut right down at the base of the stem. I don't want to pull these apart. I don't want to pull them out and disturb the little baby root system that's establishing. I want to let these roots get really nice and strong and not try to tease them apart or do anything like that right now. I'm going to go through here and I'm going to find strongest. Because all I want at the end of this is 3 kale plants. That's all I want. I don't want a ton. And my broccoli is a little bit floppy, but that's okay. Broccoli is one of those plants that you can bury it deeper when you pot it up. So I'm not gonna worry too much. So I've got 1 there. I seeded these, if you remember, a little bit heavier because this was old seed, a couple years old. And I still had really good germination, but you don't always know what you're gonna have. So again, the tomatoes, I'm picking the strongest stem. Now you can see the after. Now those single plants will be so much happier in their cells. The only thing, so those habanada peppers I've only had 1 germinate so far. And this was seed that was a year old, but it was also from a company that I've not tried before. So I might try to sow those again to get some more cells, or give it a couple more days to see if those do come up. And then the same with like the other foxgloves and coreopsis, these need to be thinned as well, but these are not far enough along that I would thin them out. So I'm gonna let them bulk up a tiny bit more, a few more days, up to a week, and then I will be doing the same process, thinning out and keeping the strongest plant. Okay, so I had something very special delivered today. This was my Valentine's Day / early Mother's Day present from my husband. It was something that I had said that I wanted for a long time. So very, very special, very exciting. I have a couple pieces from my favorite potter. He is a English potter named George Bronwin. You've heard me talk about him before. Okay, so here's the first piece. George always packages everything so safely. So I'm just, fingers crossed, praying that everything is in safe condition, since he works so hard on these and packages them so meticulously. Okay. All right, here's piece number 1. Look at this beautiful card. This is a salt piggy, or in America we typically say salt cellar. Isn't that so cute? So I need to get a little olive wood spoon or something, but that'll sit on my counter. I have salt, and I just really liked that. The piece de resistance. So this is the lid to make sure I have a good grip on it. Beautiful. This is the lid to my special George Bronwin jar. This is incredible. Can't even tell you how much I love this. This is gonna go on my mantle in my living room, which we are redoing at the moment. And I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, but he has his logo right here in the front with a little stamp. These are all hand thrown and hand painted and just incredibly special, and I am so excited to have this beautiful jar. So now I'm going to be inserting some video footage that I filmed last week planting sweet peas in my kitchen garden and showing you the process of how I do that. I had already put raised bed, topped up all the raised beds with raised bed mix when I had planted spring bulbs or fall bulbs, tulips and daffodils, into the kitchen garden in the fall. So those were already topped up with fresh compost, and then what I did was just add a layer of compost and fertilizer to the top of the surface of the soil before I sowed my sweet pea seeds into that soil. And then I also planted the rest of my sweet pea seeds in the ground outside in my backyard with the expandable trellises, but I will be filming that in a later video and showing you that in another update. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.